Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and thank you for that kind introduction. This is my third interaction with colleagues from Bertelsmann about good career guidance, and I'm very pleased to come back here again to Madrid at this very auspicious moment when you are launching your new excellence career guidance framework. I'm going to tell you about some experiences from England. Now, let me say, I've spent quite a lot of today talking to the press. I spoke to a reporter from El País and from ABC, and maybe we will have some headlines in El País about England that are different from the ones that you've been having most days from your headlines from the UK about other things that are going on in the UK. Wouldn't that be nice? And isn't it good that the media are so interested in this area which we all recognise to be so important, good career guidance? Everything I'm talking about is available in English on the website of the Gatsby Charitable Foundation, including all of the appendices and the country reports. There's a lot of additional information there. So I'm going to talk to you, first of all, rather briefly about what we did in this international study. Then I'm going to talk about our 8 benchmarks for good career guidance. I want to talk about some of the successes that we have demonstrated in England, and finally talk about the influence that we've had on national policy. So let me begin by telling you about what we wanted to know and why. Now, I, like many of you, am a former school head teacher. I used to be head of a large secondary school near London, very diverse, 26 different mother tongue languages, lots of different religions, families that were wealthy, families that were poor. It was a wonderful school to be the head of. And I realized very soon that career guidance is important in many, many ways. But for me, the most important was that it's the key to social mobility. I knew that in my school, there were many families who could provide excellent career guidance, families with graduates and highly skilled workers and social groups who could help their children to identify the best careers to follow. But I also knew that there were families that had no graduates, no one with skilled employment, maybe no one employed. For the children of those families, where will they get their advice about their future career if they don't get it from the school? And it was that realization that made me so interested in career guidance. And in 2014, we published the Good Career Guidance Report because we were conscious that there were a lot of complaints that career guidance in schools in England was very patchy. Sometimes it was very good, sometimes it was not very good, and sometimes it didn't exist at all. So how could we get consistent career guidance in our schools in England? And the starting point for that was to say, well, what would it look like if it was good? And that was why we set out on an international study to try and find what career guidance looks like when it's good. We did a lot of literature review and we surveyed a lot of schools in England, but the key part of this work was to visit 6 countries known to have good career guidance: the Netherlands, Germany, Hong Kong, Finland, Canada, and Ireland. And from these visits, where we went into schools, we met hundreds of students, we met dozens of teachers, we met school leaders, we met employers, people from ministries. From these visits, we formulated our 8 benchmarks for good career guidance. So let me now very quickly tell you about these 8 benchmarks. And the most important thing is to say that there is no one that's more important than the others. Good career guidance involves the whole school. And it's about doing a number of things and doing them well. And if you do all of these things, you will get good career guidance. So here they are. Here are the 8 benchmarks. In a moment, I'm going to just highlight 1 or 2 of them. So I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but you will see, glancing at them, they include a stable careers program. Now that's something that can be managed within the school. They also include learning from career and labour market information. That's something that can be done within the school. They include addressing the needs of each pupil as an individual, not as a stereotype. That can be done in the school. Linking curriculum learning to careers so that teachers of individual subjects show young people how they link to careers. And I'm very interested by the work that we're hearing about from Anaya to use textbooks as a vehicle for helping with career guidance. That is what benchmark 4 is all about. Benchmarks 5 and 6, however, are not about what happens in the school, because a very important part of career guidance is about what happens outside the school when the young people go into their careers. So benchmarks 5 and 6 are about giving young people a view of what the world is like. Benchmark 5 is about showing them a wide range of different employers. Benchmark 6 is about giving them a deep experience of the workplace and what it's like to be in work. And very quickly, just to finish off, benchmark 7 is another one that goes on outside of the school, because it's about showing young people the opportunities that there are in universities, higher education, but also, and very importantly, in vocational training and apprenticeships. These are an important option that schools don't necessarily tell their young people about. And benchmark number 8 is called personal guidance, and maybe that's the thing that people think about first when they consider career guidance, the one-to-one interview with a counsellor. That's important, but it's not the only thing that matters. Now, very quickly, I'd just like to give you an example of how these benchmarks work. So benchmark 1 is called a stable careers program. And you can see that it's broken down into 3 parts. First of all, every school should have a stable career program, defining what the program is and who is responsible for it, so naming the career leader. Benchmark 2 is that the program should be published on the school's website so that everyone can see it and work on it. And sub-benchmark 3 is that it should be regularly evaluated. Now, all of our 8 benchmarks work this way. So they are broken down into sub-units, and each one can be measured. Can you see how a school could say, yes, we do that, or no, we don't do it, to each one of those things? And this measurability has been very important, because it enables schools to check where they are on the benchmarks. All of this requires leadership, and when we visited the Netherlands, I was very impressed to hear about the school decaan. This is the name that they give in the Netherlands to the careers leader, the person who leads all of this activity right the way across the school and outside the school with employers. And we followed this model in England with the role we call careers leader. Very quickly, running through the 2 ones to do with the employment and the workplace, I just wanted to mention that if you want a country that does career guidance very, very well, in my opinion, it is Finland. And one example is the way that they do work experience. This is benchmark 6. It's very, very efficient. Every young person has 3 separate opportunities to visit a workplace. So this is as good as it gets. I've never seen better work experience, benchmark 6, than this in Finland. So there they are, 8 benchmarks for good career guidance. And I was very interested to see that when colleagues at Bertelsmann here in Spain adapted them, they took these 8 and they added an extra 2. And you're going to hear more about that a little bit later on. I said earlier that an important part of this program is your ability to measure yourself against it. And we developed an online audit tool called Compass, which schools can actually use to check where they are on each benchmark. It's a self-audit tool. It's confidential. No one's checking it. It remains confidential to the school so that they can look and see how many benchmarks they're meeting. Now, I want to tell you now about why we believe this is a successful approach. Shortly after we published the report, we decided to run a pilot in the northeast of England. Now, the northeast of England is up there next to Scotland. A lot of it is a post-industrial area, quite a lot of unemployment, quite a lot of social deprivation, and a wide range of different kinds of schools, rural, suburban, city schools, and a wide range of socioeconomic status. So it was a good place to test the benchmarks. So we selected 13 schools and 3 vocational colleges to test the benchmarks with. And the very first thing we did was to audit them, to see how many benchmarks they were reaching. And you can see from the scores there, 8 of the schools and colleges were achieving 0 benchmarks, and none of them were achieving anything like 8. We ran the pilot for a year, and we audited them again and again. So that after 2 years, we found that the situation had really changed quite dramatically. There were no schools that were achieving less than 5 benchmarks. 8 of them were achieving 7, and 3 were actually achieving all 8 of the benchmarks. So this was the result of the schools being focused on knowing what they had to do and being able to measure whether they were doing it. So we were very pleased with that progress. And we've had an external evaluation carried out on this pilot, which is now finished. And of course, the thing that really matters is not so much the benchmarks as what happens to the pupils. They're the ones who matter in the end. And we gave a test to the pupils when they started the pilot to test their career readiness. So we asked them questions like, do you know how to apply to university? Do you know how to apply for a vocational program? Where would you go for advice on the best kind of apprenticeship to get? Those sort of questions. And we found a very significant improvement in career readiness between the beginning of the pilot and the end. Secondly, and this was even more pleasing, we actually found that the schools that took part in the pilot achieved better in national tests than a matched group who didn't take part in the pilot. And you might say, why on earth was that? Well, think about it. If young people have a better idea of where they want to go with their education, they're more likely to engage in it and concentrate on it and focus on it. And that's what we found there. We also had a large number of very, very moving individual stories about things that had happened to young people, like Liam there, who went to a special school for children who were too badly behaved to stay in a regular school. And for the first time in his life, he was coming home telling his mother, as a result of his experience at workplace, what he was really interested in and what he wanted to do in the future. So why was this giving us such success? Well, first of all, it's the clarity of having a framework that everyone understands. And that clear framework, we spent a lot of time on the words, understanding what the words would mean to schools so that it was absolutely clear, and also, of course, on how to measure themselves against it using the Compass tool. But the other thing was that we got employers saying, now we can understand what our role is in career guidance. It isn't just about schools, it's about us as employers as well, and we can play a part. We also learnt that if you have a regional structure, then you gain a lot. In the Northeast region, we had a person leading it called Ryan Gibson, and he was very effective at helping the schools and encouraging them along, and building networks so that schools that were involved in the pilot could learn from each other. So, what are the things that really made this possible? First of all, the idea of a career leader within the school. And later on, you're going to hear from Emma McDermott, who is herself a career leader within her school. These are very, very important people because they are the people who conduct the orchestra. I've told you how there are so many things. There are 8 things that you have to get right in career guidance, and the career leader conducts this orchestra and leads it all along. And it turns out that they were very important. But also, and this is particularly relevant to the people here today, we found that the most successful schools were the ones that had strong commitment from the school leader, the head teacher, backing the career leader. And that is essential. Because if you don't get the commitment at the top of the school, then career guidance doesn't become a high enough priority. We also found that a key enabler is training staff, training them, first of all, to understand the vocational system, because most teachers haven't been through the vocational system. They went to university, most of our teachers. They need to understand our vocational system, especially because it's changing. So training in that was another important enabler. No, it wasn't all success all the way. There are some barriers, and one of the most significant barriers is that some schools will tend to say, oh, here we go, another initiative, another thing that we've got to do. And we have to demonstrate to them that actually this isn't just another thing, because it lies right at the heart of the school and it enables other good things to happen within the school. Now, I'd like to finish by talking about the influence that we've had on national policy. Because we had a successful pilot, we found our government ministers started saying, can we use this in other parts of England? And they went up to visit the schools in the Northeast. And at the end of 2017, 3 policy documents were published by our education ministry. And in it, they said that the career guidance policy would be based on the Gatsby benchmarks. So they have taken our work and made it the heart of national policy for 3,500 secondary schools in England. So that was very good news. What have the schools got to do? Well, according to those policy documents, they have to start now towards meeting all 8 benchmarks, and they should aim to meet them by 2020. That's a big challenge, by the way. Big demand to get to all 8 by 2020. They have to appoint a person to be the careers leader, and they have to name them on the school website. And they have to publish details of their careers program. So in other words, we're asking them to meet benchmark 1, but this time it's the government asking them to do it. I'm going to skip that last slide because I just want to conclude with what might happen next. You will have noticed that these benchmarks are input benchmarks. They're things that the school has to do in order to get good career guidance. What are we really interested in? We're really interested in the outputs and the outcomes, which are people in good jobs, doing the job well, and leading happy lives. That's ultimately what I want. We've got a long way to go before we can measure the outputs. We can measure the inputs. Can we measure the outputs? And a piece of work that I'm interested in at the moment is the kind of skill. Can we measure the kind of skills that young people come out of school with so that we can ultimately tell in 10 years or so time whether this has been as successful as it looks at the moment as if it will be. So thank you very much for listening. I'm very pleased to be here again, and I do congratulate the Bertelsmann Foundation on their great imagination in launching their 10 benchmarks here today. Thank you.